Hello, sir.
How are you? I think I know you.
You sound like you could know me. You've got a very English accent, sir. Very well spoken.
Well, I don't know if it's English. So many people seem to think I have, a different accent every time they meet me.
No,
So,
you are well spoken. You sound like you should be sitting in Hampstead Garden suburb, sipping a tea of Darjeeling, a cup of Darjeeling.
remind me, you're the YouTuber, right? You're a YouTuber, I think
Yes,
it is.
yeah, I'm a YouTuber. Yeah,
Yes, yes, because I'm sure I've seen you somewhere. I think it was in London or somewhere talking to
yeah.
people.
London, speaking to jihadis or Nazis. That's my usual
Uh,
remit.
I don't think that's a very good, you know, life prolonging activity to be engaging in, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, it does come with certain hazards. It's a little bit of small print. You have to
Yeah.
sign the disclaimer at the end, like you may
I've,
lose
I've,
your
mhm.
head, you may lose. Yeah, but hey, we all
I've
get our
I've
kicks
grown
in different
rather fond
ways.
of breathing, so I tend to avoid jihadis
So,
as much as possible.
are you Muslim, Christian?
No, I'm
Um,
I'm a Christian.
I was going to guess Christian, and because
hmm
you got Israel rather than Palestine as your keyword. Um, yeah.
Well, that is true. Um, but my foundation for supporting Israel, what I do is I don't base it on theological belief because if I pull out my holy book, they can easily pull out theirs, and then we're stuck nowhere. So my belief that the Israelis are generally more that I support the Israelis more than I do the Palestinians is based on is historical facts and evidence.
So
Um,
I'm the same. I mean, I can make an argument from history, from religion, from
mhm.
their religion, but the
Yeah.
the most solid one, which is universally accepted for the reasons you cited, is the
Yeah.
historical claim of the Jewish people and the necessity
Mhm.
for the Jewish people to have a state for our own safety. So yeah, I'd agree with you.
Actually, perhaps because I think I have you at a bit of a disadvantage because I've seen you and you have never interacted with me. Um, my defense of the state of Israel comes from not really the historical claim that Israel has, a reason to exist in terms of it was your historical homeland, because you lived somewhere 2,000 years ago does not give you a right to live there today. But it gives you, um, in my understanding of it, because I use the law, I'm a lawyer by profession. So my defense of Israel is that if we look at the other states that were founded by the same colonial powers that founded Israel, none of those states has been questioned. And therefore, if we accept that the existence of Jordan, of Egypt, of Saudi Arabia, of Syria is legitimate, why should we not equally accept that the existence of Israel is equally legitimate? And so, because it removes all the other nonsense about, well, you didn't live here 2000, you haven't lived here in 2000 years and all of that kind of nonsense, because it's like we'll be here all day with people claiming, well, you haven't lived here, we are living here now, and all of that. You're European colonizers. Funniest thing I should tell you, I had the funniest discussion with the guy from Portugal, and he tells me the Jews are European. And I was like, oh, really? So which of the European tribes do they come from? And then he immediately, switched tactics to now insulting me and was like, okay. I was like, but you just said they're European. So like you should be able to tell me which of the European tribes they come from. Well, of course they come from Israel, but they don't live there anymore. I was like, but that refutes your claim completely.
So that's fascinating. Are you okay with me sharing this content on my YouTube, or would you rather remain anonymous?
Would you want to share it?
Particularly
Okay,
the bit you
sure.
just said about the reason for Israel. I tell you what, should we do something I've
Sure.
never done before? Should
Okay.
we have a little debate? But I'm going to be the
Okay.
anti-Zionist, and you're going to be the
Okay, sure, go
Zionist.
ahead.
So
Sure, go
amazing.
ahead.
So if I was to listen to the argument you just said, how I would push back
hmm hmm
is I would say all the other states
Yeah.
that were created, Sykes-Picot, San
hmm
Remo, Cairo Peace
Yeah.
Conference, well, all these states where
Yeah.
they came into existence, whether it was Jordan, Egypt, Syria, they were created by colonial powers, but they were awarded to an indigenous population that was already in the land. Israel wasn't. Israel was a colonial project, and it was full of European Jews. And granted, there were some Jews from the Middle East, and maybe 3 Jews that already lived in Israel, but they were giving the state to a people that had no right to be there.
Okay, I get your argument there, but again, it fails because if you examine the claim of indigeneity, completely fails when you look at the Arabic peoples. Because I am African, I'm Kenyan. Let's examine North Africa. None of the Arab states that are founded in North Africa are traditionally Arabic speaking or Arabic by ethnicity. You have the Tamazight, the Berber, the Tuareg, the Twi. All of them are not Arabs. Yet today they are forced to be Arab and Muslim. So if we look at those states, why are they now Arab and Muslim? It's not because they were traditionally so, but because mass displacements of people happened. And if you look at the time when the state of Israel was founded, there was mass displacement of people from within multiple countries, not just Israel. There was everybody being moved by everybody else because of the multiple wars that were being waged, some for independence, some because of the Second World War. So to claim that that the governments gave, that the colonial powers gave the land to indigenous peoples, really you have to look at what do you mean by indigenous, because the real indigenous peoples are the Tuareg, the Berber, the Twi, and the Amazigh peoples. Those are the actual indigenous peoples. The Arabs are not indigenous to Africa. The clue is in the name, Arab. They come from the Arabian Peninsula. So why didn't they turn over the land to the indigenous peoples? Because Arabs are very happy to impose the laws of conquest on others. They just don't want them to be imposed on them.
So I hear what you're saying. And I'm obviously playing devil's advocate here. I hear what you're saying,
No,
and maybe that works for North Africa, but
Mm-hmm.
Palestine is different. Palestine is different because in Palestine, I've got a friend of mine. His surname is Canaan. Why? Because he descends from the Canaanites. The Palestinians are the Canaanites. They're the true indigenous people.
Oh, Jesus. I've heard.
He was also no. And you've just mentioned one of the most famous Palestinians of all time.
Oh, really?
You invoked his name, Jesus, the Palestinian. But like a true white colonizer, you changed his name from Isa to Jesus. Like a typical European.
Of course. So I changed his name to follow and being comporting with a religion that was not in existence at the time of his birth to 700 years later.
So, no, again, you're just demonstrating your ignorance because Adam was a Muslim.
Of course.
Ibrahim was a Muslim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Moses
Isa
was a Muslim.
Musa was a Muslim. They were all Muslims. They all submitted to Allah.
Do you mind if we talk about something that perhaps is a little bit more pertinent to
me? Yes, of course.
Because I think it's something that I can actually speak of with authority here. And 2 things actually. The first is there have been significant claims made about the Israelis in terms of the current ongoing war, that Israel is committing genocide. I know you're not a stranger to these claims. Because you asked me for permission to stream this, so perhaps it will be useful to your audience later on. Let your audience go and check a similar situation, because when you compare situations, you have to make them similar so that you can actually examine what are the conditions there and what are the conditions here, and what is the ultimate result. If you're on your computer or laptop, you can check what I'm about to tell you. So a few years ago, the ISIS caliphate spread to a city in the Philippine archipelago called Marawi city. Do you have you ever heard of that city?
No, and I'm just going to Google it. It's you are a very educated person, so I'm glad we've Marawi city there. I've got it. Yes.
Yeah. So during that time, ISIS spread. So Marawi city is located on an island on the Philippine archipelago called Mindanao. So um, the the caliphate was ruled by a bunch of terrorist groups which had united together, and the two groups that formed the caliphate there were the Abu Sayyaf and Abu Maute groups, under the leadership of a guy called Ismailon Hapilon. He was the leader of ISIS in that part of the world, and they basically took over that city by executing the local police constabulary. They lined them up and shot them in the back of the head. I saw the footage. And then they went on to systematically execute practically every other government official on the city, in the city. And then immediately thereafter, of course, the Philippine government is not going to allow, terrorists to take over the city and take over the island. So they responded. So what is key here is I would like you to examine, if you can, look at the before and after images of the city. After the Battle of Marawi, look at the before and after images.
I'll
Because
pull these up on
part of the
screen for you.
claim, yeah, part of the claim that is being made against the Israelis is that the destruction of Gaza is being done with punitive intent to destroy as much as possible in order to make the lives of Palestinians unlivable. And it's not done for any strategic reason. But if you look at the city of Marawi, where it is an indigenous Filipino city, therefore, the Filipino government is responsible for the reconstruction effort. Have you seen the before and after?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. It's very comparable.
You see, so if the argument is that the Israelis are destroying Gaza for the purpose of making it unlivable or punishing the Palestinian peoples, what is the argument being used in Marawi? Because it is exactly the same. If you look at the level of destruction, the only difference is that perhaps the Filipino government was not employing the tactic of bulldozing the buildings after the strikes. But if you look at any person who is a structural engineer and you ask them, every explosive device of sufficient magnitude creates a miniature seismic event, meaning that even though the building may look outwardly stable, it has in fact suffered significant structural damage, and most of them will have to be torn down anyway. And that's exactly what happened in Marawi. So that thereafter, majority of the buildings in Marawi had to be torn down. And this was the Filipino government fighting terrorists within its own country, not like what is being said about the Israelis that you guys are going in to destroy and wipe out everybody. So that's point number one on the genocide, on the destruction of civilian, infrastructure, that this is just, punitive, it has no strategic purpose. Um, I think the other bit is, and this I have to tell you because um, I want you guys to get better at this. Um, the communication strategy of the Israeli government has been the most shambolic I have ever witnessed in my life. I'll give you an example. Your ambassador to my country went on he was invited to television to explain to the Kenyan public what is happening in Israel, what's going on. And to give you a backdrop, Kenya is 80% Christian. So already the backdrop of support in Kenya is quite high relative to other countries which are majority Muslim or agnostic or whatever. So you would hope that you would send somebody to the country who actually understands, who is a good public speaker. But unfortunately, the guy is not a native English speaker. He's not a good orator. So he goes on the air, and Jesus, it was not good. The following morning, they invite the Fatah spokesman. And my God, young, energetic, vibrant. We are victims. We are that. The evil Zionists are doing this to us. And I was just like, oh my God, Israel is so cooked. Israel is so cooked. Because it's like, this is an own goal that needed not happen. That just needed not to have happened. Because just
What made
sorry, go ahead.
what made the Israeli ambassador's speech so bad? What was I can guess what the Palestinians said, but where are we failing? How did he fail or how did they fail?
It's not on him particularly only, because I've looked at even your English speaking ambassadors, in like your ambassador to the UK, the lady, right? To the domestic is, I have a friend in Israel, his name is Rudy, and he tells me, like, but that's what we want him to say. So one time I told him, the problem is you guys don't understand that the job of the ambassador is not to pander to the local domestic Israeli audience, because everything that ambassador is saying, everybody in Israel already knows. This is not for you. This is for us, for people who don't know what's happening and would like to know. So the failure was, when you are doing public speaking, as you do, and as I do in my profession, you need to understand your audience. You need to understand what is their level of information and how well you can package the information into disseminable bits so that they can understand what is happening. And unfortunately, when you have people who are very good technocrats, maybe very good on paper, but don't know how to communicate well enough. And that has been Israel's problem worldwide, because, and that I think is because of the over reliance on America. I've got to be honest with you. I think there's been an over reliance on your relationship with America, to the point where when people who are not American attempt to advise you on, like, guys, you communicate better. Speak, while you don't matter. Only America matters, and that America is on our side. But as you've seen of late, America is not on your side as it used to be before. And if a Democrat takes office in 2028, my God, it's over. So my point is, I wished he would have communicated better. I wished he would have, because there are many people who truthfully don't know much about this conflict. They're just hearing about things on the news. They hear about things from the pro-Hamas bots, and you know how many bots there are on TikTok and Instagram and all these other places. And they thought that the person who should be able to explain what is happening is definitely the highest diplomat that Israel has sent to our country. That should be the person. And it was just really disappointing. If you go and check the comments on the YouTube of of, of the interview, finally, people were just like, what is this? Like, this guy couldn't explain what's going on, right? So this is not a dig against him. I'm not saying he should even be removed as an ambassador. Like I said, he might be a very good technocrat. He may be a very good diplomat. We just need people who are able to communicate better. That's my view. Because you would think that the conflict in Israel is the most important thing, but I come from a region of the world where a few months ago there was a massacre in Sudan, so massive it could be seen from satellite imagery, where the blood was literally, yeah, it painted the ground red, but nobody cared. No, nobody cared.
It's staggering. For the 10 years that preceded October the 7th, the United Nations issued more critical resolutions against Israel than every other nation in the world combined. And you have to realize that, I know you will realize, but many of the people watching won't, that in most of those years, the death toll was double digits. Less than 100 people died. Meanwhile, there were conflicts raging where tens or hundreds of thousands of people were being killed. And you add all those conflicts together, you throw in places like North Korea, Iran, and you put this all together, and all of this combined has less resolutions than a conflict with double-digit deaths. It's not about the casualties of the war. It's about the hatred, the fixation on this one conflict. And to feed into what you were saying about the diplomats, Israel suffers from, this is how I perceive the problem anyway, from a self-inflicted problem. So for 2,000 years, the Jewish people have had to justify their actions to their overlords. So if you were a Jew living in Spain, you had to justify why you were behaving. If the community, the nation turned on you, you were helpless. And so all you had was your ability to explain and justify and apologize and try and to prevent yourself from being massacred. The Zionists, the early Zionists shifted that. They said, we are done explaining to the nations why we have a right to breathe. And so, as a consequence, the modern Israeli mentality is we don't need to justify our actions. We don't need to explain ourselves to the world. We will do what we need to do to ensure that our children have a safer existence than we do today. But we're done explaining. And I think it's a mistake. I agree with you. I think there are people we do need to convince. I don't believe we need to justify our actions. There's some wild jihadi or some blue-haired progressive, but to neutral Christians in Kenya, to neutral Englishmen in the UK, we absolutely should be explaining to them, not because we're justifying our actions, but because in that void, our enemies will step in and they will decimate us. Support for Israel amongst 18 to, I think, 30-year-olds in America, as that a young demographic, has dropped. It's decimated. Now, I think it's 87% or something around there of Americans, young Americans, are now think negatively of Israel. That's a staggering turnaround. And so we do need to do better.
Unfortunately, yes. I sent you my Instagram just in case my internet cuts out sometimes.
I've got that now. I'm gonna. Can I ask one quick question as well, just while I'm adding you? Was the Rudy? Is he an influencer? The Rudy you spoke to?
No.
You said you got a friend in Israel.
No, not Rudy Rochman. I think that's.
I was going to say because he spends a lot of time looking for the lost tribes, and I wondered maybe he'd made his way to Kenya and spoke to you.
No. It's a much older guy. He's Rudy. My point, I think when you said about the death toll, would you mind if we talked about that for a little while?
Yeah, absolutely. No, man, I'd like to talk about that, yes.
So I did an analysis about this, like I said, because part of my profession, I'm interested in international law. So Hamas has claimed 70,000 casualties so far. The IDF has claimed about 20,000 of those were combatants, right? That they were Hamas fighters. So if we extract the 20,000 from the 70, we get 50,000. And then again, we have to go and look at 15 to 20% of rockets launched from Gaza by Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Hamas land within Gaza, according to the best estimates available to us. Meaning that a few thousand of the people that died within Gaza, or at least 1,000 of them, were killed by Hamas's own rockets, because they don't have a guidance system, as you know. Their guidance system is basically point the rocket to the sky and inshallah it gets to where it's supposed to get to, right? Then we have the fake reports. Hundreds and thousands of people reported dead who were not dead, or in fact fictitious claims of deaths. And then we have hundreds of people executed by Hamas themselves for attempting to flee to safe zones, which Hamas actually filmed and put online for the whole world to see. And then we have, even on top of that, when you look at the normal death rate in Gaza before the war, it was 500 people a month from disease, old age, and accidents. Then you extrapolate 500 people a month for 2 years. That gives us about 12,000 people, right? But now it's almost, isn't it more than 2 years now? It's almost 2.5, right? So it should be around 15,000 people, somewhere there. So we extract that from those figures, and we arrive at around 30,000 people in terms of total, how many innocent people were killed. Now, this figure looks high, and it is high, because unfortunately, when you're talking about civilian casualties, there's a sense of gallows humor a little bit where people can desensitize and, attempt to make it look like it's not a significant number. It is. It absolutely is. But when we put it into context, in the Tigray-Eritrean conflict that happened just 2 years ago, 600,000 were killed. 600,000. In Ethiopia, that was Ethiopia and Eritrea. In Sudan, more than 1 million dead, right? In Congo, similar figure. In Yemen, where the Americans refueled and maintained the Saudi jets while they were bombing civilians, 450,000 people dead. 250 to about 200,000 dead direct from casualties from the bombing, and another 200,000 to around 300,000 people dead from the outbreaks of cholera, starvation, and the like, right? So when I examined those numbers, I said, okay, but if you look at it, it's basically one combatant to every perhaps two civilians dead. So I looked at the other guys who are doing this, the British, the Americans, the French. What have they accomplished? Have you seen the report from the American Army Inspector General?
Possibly. And from where?
He did an internal investigation where he covered the Precision Strike Program, which is their drone warfare program, which was intended for the minimization of civilian casualties. And after he concluded the report, it was so damaging because they discovered that actually from internal investigations, which this is an internal document, that 9 out of every 10 civilians, now 9 out of every 10 combat casualties incurred by the drone program were actually innocent civilians. So then I look at the Israeli one and I'm like, but this is 1 to 2. Here we're talking of 9 out of every 10 are innocent. And it's like, where else have we seen something this low receive so much more attention? Because it's like, it doesn't make any logical sense because I, to me, it doesn't make any logical sense because I have challenged people on this repeatedly. I've just told them, please tell me where you can find a casualty figure that is lower in the same kind of circumstances, which is why I brought up Marawi earlier, because when you look at Marawi, that's the level of destruction, the level of civilian deaths. I mean, because it's a similar situation. It's a dense urban environment, and you saw the city, what it looked like before. But unfortunately, when you're speaking to people who are ideologically captured, facts and evidence just go right over their heads. They're not interested whatsoever. And for me, as a Kenyan, as an African, I'm like, why are we wasting our time talking about this when there is a real genocide happening right next door to my country? There is a real ethnic cleansing happening right here, and nobody cares. I looked at the budget from the UN Relief Works Agency, right? It receives about, on an annual basis, about $2 billion. Would you care to guess how much money the UNHCR, which is responsible for everybody else, receives for the whole Horn of Africa, the whole Eastern African region?
So if it's the east of it, it's going to be in the, if they're lucky, the tens of millions. If they're lucky, if it's 2 billion, if it's 2 billion budget, yeah. So how much do they receive? 2 billion of the.
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually higher than
a region
I
of the
imagined.
world. Yeah, for a region covering 500 million people.
Yeah.
And we are receiving the same amount as 8 million people.
So yes, that's staggering, and I'd imagine that's where the bulk of, or at least I'd imagine that's a sizable percentage of the
of the refugee crisis.
Yeah.
Because Kenya has been hosting refugees now for the last 30 years. We are the most stable, most economically prosperous country in the region, so everybody comes here when they're in trouble. So we've got millions of people over here as refugees. Yet, if you look at the funding for us, and look at the funding that's being given to the Gazan situation, because it has always struck me as odd as to why we have a specifically dedicated UN agency for one group of people when everybody else has to share,
And they also have a very different definition of refugee as well. But just before we go to refugee, I just want to quickly pull us back to some of the stuff you're saying. So the numbers, I think they're even stronger in terms of Israel's efforts they're making to preserve civilian life than you even paint. So Netanyahu went on record probably a year ago now saying it was 30,000 militants that had been killed. And that's out of a death
Yes.
toll of 72,000. So you mentioned 20, I've heard 25, 30. So I think
Yes.
that numbers is even higher than you painted in
Yes.
terms of and the reason, this is the bit that just people
Hmm.
glaze over, they skip over, and I cannot get my head. For years we heard Gaza is a concentration camp. It's the most densely
Yeah.
populated place on earth. It's not the most
Hmm.
it's not a concentration camp,
It simply
and it's
isn't.
not the
Yeah.
most densely
Hmm.
populated, but it is a very densely populated area. And
Yes.
to avoid a 9-to-1 civilian or higher to militant
Hmm.
ratio, Israel took
Yeah.
extraordinary lengths that have not been seen in any other conflict, certainly not at this scale, where they made
Yeah.
millions of phone calls, sent millions of text messages, dropped millions of flyers from planes telling civilians to
Yes.
leave so they could evacuate them. And that's how we got to this,
Hmm.
though. And so, how did the international community react? The international community reacts by saying, all eyes on Rafah. Israel's about to evacuate the civilians of Rafah.
Hmm.
And the alternative would have been for Israel, instead of
Yeah.
evacuating the civilians, to just
Yeah.
bomb, 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 bomb,
Yeah.
bomb, bomb. And we would have seen tens of thousands dead. And another thing that people don't consider, we've been told now for a year that
Yeah.
there are many people under the rubble. Now, how the Ministry of Health intake for their names works is if you suspect someone is missing, then you
Yeah.
fill in the form. If they get a
Yeah.
body and they can ID it, they'll put the ID there. But if you're a family member and your building was destroyed and you haven't seen your uncle since
Yeah.
then you fill in the form and that gets counted. And so, if anything, there's going to be an overcount. But we were told, no, when the bodies under the rubble are finally
Yeah.
exposed, when they dig them out, there's going to be 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 dead. The numbers are
Hmm.
only being revised down, not up.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
not finding those missing bodies. Why? Because they don't exist. Israel took incredible measures to
Yeah.
minimize civilian casualties, which wasn't reflected in Sudan, which wasn't reflected in Yemen, which wasn't reflected in any other conflict, which the West didn't care about. And the reason they didn't care about it, and
Yeah.
is because they don't care when Muslims kill Muslims. They don't care
That's true.
when people with a darker complexion than I have kill each other
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
continents they can't find on the map. They care about
Hmm.
this one conflict. Now,
Hmm.
my biases, I believe it's because there's Jews involved. There's many different
Hmm.
explanations people propose as to why it is, but they don't care. The streets were empty. I
Yeah.
once saw a tiny, tiny protest in
Hmm.
London. It
Hmm.
was maybe no, it was in Manchester in the UK
Hmm.
for Sudan, and there were some Sudanese guys waving the
Hmm.
Sudanese flag. And
Yeah.
do you know how the Brits responded? Kept on coming
Yeah.
up to them saying, "Free Palestine, we stand with you, my brother. Free Palestine," because for them they couldn't even differentiate between the flags. And
Yes.
yeah,
I think. I think Joseph, you are correct because one of the things that happens in the global arena is anytime when I, as a Kenyan, speak to my European counterparts or American counterparts, I am quickly reminded that I am an African and therefore I'm practically brain dead as far as they're concerned. Therefore, nothing I say is of any value to them. So, for instance, because one of my specialties has been on immigration law, when when we advise people in Europe, hey, look, it's not a good idea to take in some of these people because not because of their ethnicity, but because of their belief structures and systems. We are told we're African. What do we know? And now look at what has happened in Europe. Look at what is happening now. Because not because you took in people of different ethnicities, but because you took people of different beliefs. Because had you taken in Somali Christians, totally different group of people from Somali Muslims, for instance, totally different group of people. But when we speak about these things, when we say to our European counterparts, listen, the actions you're involved in are going to create a significant problem, or to our American friends, when we tell them that, they treat us like, the only thing we're good for is for posing for photos for UNICEF for starving children. So why should they listen to us? And unfortunately, that is the case when it comes to Africans dying or people from my part of the world being killed in conflict. Nobody cares. I had this discussion just a few days ago with some guy who said to me he was so incensed about the Gaza situation. So I asked him the location of the massacres in Sudan. No idea. Location of massacres in Ethiopia. No idea. Didn't know anything about it. Nothing. And I said to him, if you're so if you're saying to me that you are concerned because of your care for human life, you care so much about the sanctity of life that you this is such a big issue. Why is it that you don't know anything about what I just said to you? You don't know anything about Sudan, you don't know anything about Ethiopia, nothing about Nigeria, nothing about Congo, nothing about Yemen, nothing. Conflicts that on an average day in Sudan, you were getting 10,000 dead a day, 10,000 dead in one day. That in Israel is like months and months and months and months. That was happening daily. And these people, nothing.
The worst offender of that was famine.
Hmm.
Sudan, since the
Yes.
beginning of the conflict, has been ravaged by a famine which has affected millions of people, which means
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of people are dying from malnutrition.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one's heard of the famine in Sudan. No one. Meanwhile, they've
Yeah.
heard of the fictitious famine in Gaza, where you could literally go on the internet, on X, and watch people like Gaza would posting videos of restaurants opened with.
Yeah.
There were Gazan reporters who were fatter,
Hmm.
larger at the end of the conflict than they were at
Yeah.
the beginning. Yet the world believes there was a genuine famine in Gaza, which there wasn't. Tragically, there were instances of largely children with
Yeah.
pre-existing medical conditions who weren't able to get the medication and the things that they needed to
Yeah.
to survive the conflict. And that's going to happen in
Yeah.
any conflict. And they were twisted and their deaths were manipulated and presented as, look, here's a starving child for malnutrition. There was no
Oh yes, I
famine in
saw the New York
Gaza.
Times article on this. Yes, it was horrendous and quite frankly shameful that the New York Times would post such a thing and not even bother to countercheck. But I think as I told you before, I am a Christian, and this may not land with some of your audience very well, but I'm still going to say this. I think part of the reason why they hate you so much is because um, anything that God favors, the devil hates, and so people will look for any opportunity to strike at what they believe God is favoring. So it doesn't matter. You could tomorrow decide to lay down all your guns; they'll still hate you. You could tomorrow decide you know, to give them everything they said they've ever wanted. They'll still hate you. So
I could not agree, man. I mean, to take it to Isaiah, a book that I'm sure we've
yeah,
both read many times.
yeah,
Isaiah is explicit. The nations will project all of their wrongdoing, all of their sins onto the Jewish people, and that's
hmm,
exactly what we're seeing. The nations genocided the Jewish people.
yeah,
Europeans decimated, slaughtered 2/3 of the Jewish population. So what's the
of
slur they
Europe.
put
Yeah,
on us? We're the genociders, despite us taking incredible lengths to keep our enemies alive.
hmm,
They accuse us of apartheid when you only
hmm,
need to travel a few hours, quite many hours south of Kenya, and you will experience a
hmm,
European apartheid. They
yeah,
have guilt for their sins and they put them on the scapegoat, the Jew, the suffering
yeah.
servant.
I,
And
I've seen this now that we're talking about Isaiah, because the jealousy part of this is jealousy and envy that they when the Jews call themselves the chosen people of God, but they just don't understand because they never read the Bible. Because God Himself says, "Egypt is my people," and Syria, right? And Israel is my inheritance. And it's like God is saying this of all of these people. He's saying this to everybody, that you are my people. Everybody is the work of my hands and my creation.
What in
So
Hebrew, as a Christian, you will respect this. You will get this. The Muslims, they don't, because they have a theological issue with this. But how do
yeah.
we refer to God? Avinu
Mm-hmm.
Malkeinu, our Father, our King. We are
Mm-hmm.
all His children, all of us. We're all Betzelem
Mm-hmm.
Elohim, all created in His image, which means we have the capacity for free thought, for free will, and with that comes the ability to do good and to do evil. I cannot tell you how happy I am to have met you. You are one of
Yeah.
the most well-spoken person I've not just met on this app, but that I've met. You are a credit to the Kenyan people. We need an
That is
Israeli
quite high praise.
ambassador. We need an Israeli ambassador in Kenya with just
Yeah.
10% of your eloquence, your clarity of
Yeah.
thought, and your ability to see the truth in a sea of noise. So, what my final request would be: what one message would you like to send as a
Mm-hmm.
Kenyan, as a Christian, as a friend of Israel, to the
Yeah.
Israeli nation, particularly those with hands-on levers that can actually make a change? What's the most important message that you could send them?
Um, I think this is coming. I think I'd have to say this as somebody who believes in the idea of nationhood for the Israeli people, for the Jewish people. And I'd have to preface this by saying that I want you to understand that your local or domestic interactions with each other are played around the world. And even though some people within Israeli communities, within the Israeli society, do not believe that it should matter what they say to each other within, it does. And I want Israel's leaders to understand that over reliance on the West is not a good idea. It's not a good thing. There are many millions of Christians within Africa, within the rest of the world, who are actually willing to support Israel, but quite frankly feel very ignored because it's like when we speak, well, you're not America, we don't care. We only care about America and what America thinks. The truth is, there are many people who support you. It's only that the over reliance on the West is a problem for us. Um, invest in your outreach to the rest of the world, invest in communication, because I want you to succeed. I want you to be at peace as much as possible. Um, and that is my message to the people in power in Israel. Invest in the relationships outside of the West. Do not make it look like that you are only interested in what the West has to say. But now to the Israeli people in general, because that's different from the people in power. I know people are not their governments. I suspect you may not agree with everything that the government has done in Israel, even though to the
Once,
Israeli
once.
people, uh, first of all, to the Israeli people, Elohim yivarech otcha. Um, and second, there are many people within the Commonwealth of nations that do pray for your safety and pray for the safety of your families. So even now, though I know it looks very bleak, it looks very dark, that everybody is out to get you and to kill you, there are many who are the spiritual seed of Abraham that pray for you, that hope for your safety, that love you. And so take heart and know that there are always going to be people like us who are praying for you, who wish you the best, who wish you to do good in life. So, because I know some of my friends in Israel are basically like, everybody hates us. No, that's not true. So, that is my message to the Israeli people and to the Israeli government. So,